Please put your hands together and help me welcome to stage Gillie Barlow. Gillie, hello. Come and have a seat. A lot of people really struggle with this concept. Why on earth would a landlord give you an option? People really struggle with that. And it's what I said before. If you don't believe that landlords will do this, guess what? You're absolutely right. If you don't believe that options are out there, you're right, you won't find any options. You can just leave them for us to do instead. But I don't want that for you. I want you to get this and build your belief about what's possible. So talk to us about this particular landlord. How did you find them? What was the circumstance?
Okay, so I found this particular house through an agent. I love working with agents, and if you can get agents to understand all about options, they are a fantastic way of finding them, because if they ring you up and say, hi, I found you an option, it's quite great, really.
Kind of works, doesn't it?
It does work, yeah. It's absolutely imperative that we obviously speak to the agents correctly, otherwise they'll just bin your file. But anyway, this was...
And most, just to say there, we're not going to cover that right now, we'll talk about it later, but most agents don't get options. They don't see the benefit because they want to get the sale right now, don't they? Okay.
Absolutely. They don't know it. A lot of agents know as much as what's written on the piece of paper. So if they're very, very young and they know what's written on the paper. So if you start suggesting something that's outside the box, they're just freaking out, and they just want to sell the property and get the commission. So in this particular instance, it was on with an agent called Chancellors, which is the biggest agent in Oxfordshire, actually. And it'd been on the market for a year. It was a very nice gentleman who wanted to move to Shropshire. He'd got a house in Farringdon that he'd managed to sell, and he'd got this already HMO property that was rented out to students that he just couldn't shift.
Okay, so he was kind of moving out of the area himself.
Yeah, he was.
So he didn't want to be around to manage it anymore.
No.
On the market, couldn't sell. So that's always a good sign, by the way. If something can't sell, that landlord's obviously got a problem, the estate agent's got a problem, and we can maybe see if we can solve that problem for them. Okay, so it was on the market for $350. You basically, what did you say to him?
Okay, so, I said quite a lot, actually, but he...
I can't believe that at all, but...
No, first of all, I built the rapport up before I mentioned anything. And once I got to the point where I could explain options without using that terminology, and when I started speaking to him, I said, please understand that first of all, I asked for his approval. So I said, would it be okay if I explained something a little bit different? By the way, you will get your commissions far quicker. And that made him listen.
That was the estate agent?
The estate agent, yeah.
Okay.
Once I'd got him to understand that this could be very powerful and it could shift the property and get him his commissions, I asked if I could have a meeting with him and the vendor. Because I didn't want him explaining options to the vendor and getting it all wrong.
Because he wouldn't do it right, would he?
Probably not.
Probably not, no, okay.
He might, and what I tend to always do is send an email to the estate agent reiterating everything that we've spoken about. So he's got it on an email in case he decides to speak to the vendor in advance.
Yeah.
But I wanted that meeting with the vendor and with him so that he saw I wasn't going to try and cut him out of the deal, but also that I would then be able to speak to the vendor myself without worrying about it being said wrong.
Great. So you had the conversation with the owner, and obviously he wanted to sell, but it wasn't selling, so this was a kind of another solution. And in an option, basically you're taking the property on and you're agreeing to buy it in a certain number of years. Now, you have the right to buy, but not the obligation to, which is pretty good. But you've got to set a price, haven't you? So how did you agree the price that you were going to buy it for?
Okay, so the way I work with options is I would never personally, this is just me, I would never go in undervalue. I would never ask less than the asking price, because otherwise I feel like I'm going in like a sort of box standard investor wanting a discount, but I'm also not going to give it to him for a certain number of years.
Yeah,
so.
Sounds like a great deal. So you're not going to pay them money and you're not going to pay me now. Great. Well, you know.
And you don't want to cheese them off. You want them to go, when I tell you what I said to the vendor, he turned around and said, why would you do that, Gillie? So what I offered was $350,000, which was the asking price. I offered it over a term of 5 years, and I offered him £1,800 a month. And he just said to me, why would you give me that much a month? And I said, because it works for me.
Yeah. Now, we should explain at this point, that's how much he was renting it out for, wasn't it?
He was getting
Oh,
that
no,
much.
so that's the profit he was making. That was the profit he was making.
But
yeah.
I didn't know that. It was just
Yeah.
coincidental.
Yeah.
I hadn't got a clue what profit he was making because I didn't know what he was paying on his mortgage.
So he could walk away, have none of the hassle, but still make the same amount of money on the property, okay? But you were able to do that because you were able to lift the rents up, weren't you?
I was. I changed certain things. I didn't spend a lot of money, but he had it on for quite low rents. It was all a bit messy, really, in terms of the way that he was structuring the rent prices. They all had different prices in the rooms. I just want to say as well that one of the reasons I believe he couldn't sell this property is because it really was a 3-bedroomed house that had been cut up. I didn't cut it up. So it was 6 tiny bedrooms, and you know, it really wasn't very nice. It had a 1-bedroomed annex, but the annex was literally a single garage, and so you could fit, the width of it was a divan bed.
Right.
You couldn't walk down the side of it.
Okay.
So he was struggling to sell it.
Let's look at the numbers now. So after all the costs, because you were able to increase the rent after paying him, you were still able to make a really good profit each month on this property, which is pretty amazing. On a property you don't own, have no mortgage on. So that's a massive, and you got it for, so is it 4 or 5 years? Because what happens about the price?
What happened was I offered $350 over 5 years, and I offered him £1,800 a month. He came back and said 5 years is too much. So I believe in the old-fashioned weighing scales where if they want something changed, then you change something else to suit you. And so when he said you can have the option for 4 years, I said, okay, we'll make the purchase price $340. And, you know, between you and me, 10 grand in 4 years isn't going to make much difference when I buy it with a mortgage, is it?
But, and he probably bought it years ago for a lot less than that anyway, so he's still making good money. And the point is, he's moving away, he doesn't have the hassle.
Absolutely no hassle. He was really struggling. There were students in there not creating a great atmosphere or indeed keeping the place nice, and he just didn't want the hassle.
Yeah. Now, how long ago was this?
The option was agreed in 2000. It was just as I started Mastermind, so 2012.
Okay, so you was your first deal on Mastermind, wasn't it?
It was my first deal on Mastermind, yeah absolutely.
Okay, 2012, so over 5 years. So obviously that, now it's beyond 5 years, so what happened? So obviously at the end of an option, you could either walk away. If it hasn't got the growth you want, you could renegotiate. You could buy it, or maybe you could flip it on to someone else. But you decided to buy it, didn't you?
I decided to buy it. I thought about it because an estate agent had approached me in year 3 and said, Gillie, in actual fact, the same estate agent, Gillie, do you want to sell your property on Grays Road? And I said, why would I want to sell my property on Grays Road? It's creating a £1,700 cash flow for me. And he said, we think you will when we tell you what it's worth. Anyway, he told me what it was worth.
Because the market had boomed quite a bit, hadn't it?
Well, it had boomed, but also I think, you know, there are several ways in which we can try and grow the yield on a property. One is capital appreciation, which we can't control. 2 is by refurbing it, perhaps. And 3 is growing the yield. And because I'd managed to shoot the rents up, the property value had gone up exponentially. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I actually told him he was rude when he told me what it was worth now, because it just doesn't seem right.
So how much did you tell him it was worth?
800,000.
In 3 years.
So the purchase price was...
That's a round of applause. And when you did the option, it was worth 350, but obviously you'd increased the rent, which has increased the value, and the market done really well as well. Okay, so that was some good news. That's a good phone call to get, isn't it?
It was quite good, yeah.
Although you didn't believe him.
I didn't really believe him.
Okay, but obviously came to the end of the option, you decided to buy it. So now obviously when you have an option, although it's worth more, you buy it for the price of the option. That can cause some challenges, and so on Sunday we're going to talk with Scott about how you can prevent that problem. But obviously you bought at the 340, the agreed price. So how did you fund that?
Okay, so what I did was I got an investor to put the deposit in for me to purchase that property, and then a few months later I refinanced 75% of its new value.
Yeah, so worth 800, 75% 600. So
600.
So in other words, you will have paid back the investor plus a return for them and walked out with a couple of £100,000 in your pocket.
Absolutely, tax-free. I like
tax-free, that's right. Now here's the thing. I mean, do all properties go up like that? No, they don't. But the whole point is, if you hadn't, I mean, it's great cash flow, but if you hadn't done that option, you wouldn't have controlled it. You would have had no possibility of having that gain, would you?
None at all. You know, I think with options, there's so much power in that you have control to create what comes next. You know, obviously we can't control the market and whether there's a you know, capital appreciation, but what we can do is control what we do to a building. So you control whether you do a refurb on it, whether you put different tenants in it, whether you up the rents in it. And when I walked into the place, I knew that I could increase the rent. So when the landlord said, why would you give me £1,800? Because at the time it would have created 650 profit for me, because the revenues when I took it on were 2,850. I knew I'd up the rents. Yeah. And I knew that over a period, maybe a year, I would get it up to a significant amount that then would grow the yield, but also create the cash I wanted each month from it.
Awesome. That's a great deal. Let's give Gillie an amazing round of applause, please. Thank you for sharing, Gillie.
Hey, it's Simon here. I just want to thank you for taking the time to watch this inspirational case study. I'm sure you got a huge amount out of it. And if you want to learn more about how you can use this incredible strategy, I've prepared 2-hour on-demand online training for you, completely free of charge, teach you what you need to know to be a successful HMO investor and landlord. All you have to do is look in the description below this video, click on the link and register to get access to that free training. I suggest you do it right now.